Hi, this is Deep Green Philosophy. Today I'm going to be sharing with you Elizabeth Peabody, a Margaret Fuller conversation on gender from 1840. Fuller, who briefly assisted Alcott in his Temple School venture, became an ever more powerful teacher in her own right. School teaching never appealed to her. She did it later in the 1830s to make ends meet while working on her writing and the study and translation of Goethe and other works of German literature. Much more successful and personally fulfilling was her adaptation of Alcott's Socratic pedagogy in a series of conversations for adults, first for a circle of already well-educated Boston area women from 1839 to 1844, and eventually also for a mixed audience. By all accounts, the former went especially well. At her best, Fuller was a compelling improviser with a singular gift of speech. Her friend and fellow Transcendentalist James Freeman Clarke recalled, "Conversation is my natural element." She agreed. "I need to be called out and never think alone without imagining some companion." She feared that this was a sign of a, quote, second-rate mind. Yet others reaped the benefit. The companion was made a thinker, as Emerson put it, and went away quite other than he came. This gift, combined with the power to make even shy people open up, made her an exceptionally magnetic presence as a discussion leader. Here's one example from a session probably originally recorded by Peabody, though the handwriting is in others. Miss Fuller's 17th conversation began with reading the articles upon the intellectual difference between men and women. The first made the difference to consist in a fineness and delicacy of organization, the greater openness to impressions, and Margaret remarked that this made no essential difference. It was only more or less. Ellen Hooper asked if the difference of organization was not essential, if it did not begin in the mind, and if this was not the author's idea. Margaret looked again and thought it was, but still said she did not find that the author made any quality belong to the mind that did not belong to the other. Ellen asked if she thought that there were any quality in the masculine or in the feminine mind that did not belong to the other. Margaret said no, she did not. And therefore she wished to see if the others fully admitted this, because if all admitted it, it would follow the course that we should hear no more of repressing or subduing faculties, because they were not fit for women to cultivate. She desired that whatever faculty we felt to be moving within us, that we should consider a principle of our perfection and cultivate it accordingly, and not excuse ourselves from any duty on the ground that we had not the intellectual powers for it. That it was not for women to do on an intellectual ground. Some farther remarks were made on the giving herself to the fine arts. It was attributed to her want of isolation. The physical inconveniences of sculpture, architecture, and even of painting were adverted to, but why not music and poetry? Miss Fuller said it troubled her to think that there was no great musical composer among women. It is true that at the period of life when men gave themselves to their pursuit, most women became mothers. But there were some women who never married. I said that these too often spent the rest of their lives in mourning over this fact, and society spoke so uniformly of women as more respectable for being married. This was long before she entirely despaired. This caused some lively talk all around, and Margaret averred that there came a time, however, when everyone must give up. I might have answered that it was but too common for youth to be past, and mind to be wedded itself to that mediocrity, which is too common the result of disappointed hope, especially if hopes are not the highest. The second piece that was read of the subtlety of women's mind, Miss Fuller summed it up after she had finished it with the words, "Women more pervasive, man more prominent." While speaking of this piece, the question came of whether Brutus's great action could have been performed by a woman. It was decided that if there were no doubt that the duty in Brutus's case, there would have been none about the duty being obligatory on a woman with the same general office. The moral nature could not be the same in man and women. A great deal of talk arose here, and Margaret repelled the sentimentalism that took away women's moral power of performing stern duty. In answer to one thing, she said that as soon as we began to calculate our condition and make allowances for it, we sank into the depths of sentimentalism. And again, Nothing I hate to hear of so much as women's lot. I wish I would never hear the word lot. Something must be wrong where there is universal lamentation. Youth ought not to be mourned, for it ought to be replaced with something better. Ms. F. then read her own piece, as she said that otherwise she should have said everything that was in it, which would make it duller when it came. It was a constant contrast of man and women. Man had more genius, women more taste. Man more determination of purpose, women more delicacy of rejection. Man more versatility, women more power of adaptation. Marianne Jackson disputed the proposition that women had less genius, as women. Is it not so? Said Miss Fuller. Is not man's intellect the fire caught from heaven? Women's the flower called forth from earth by the ray? Miss Park, Anna Shaw, Ellen Hooper seemed inclined also to doubt this proposition. Somewhere here, Margaret defined taste the reasoning of beauty, and women the interpreter of genius. Then came Sally Gardner's piece, of which Miss Fuller remarked that it was an aspiration which is prophecy, and all seemed charmed when it and spoke of its beautiful composition. Here it is. I recognize between man and women a necessary difference of position, of which the results are accidental or arbitrary. It was founded in the origin of society on the difference of physical strength, when materials were scanty and labor which procured and made them available was all important. The first lyrics, doubtless among the earliest mental efforts, celebrated the deeds of the strongest. The first epics sung arms and the men which wielded them. Now we vastly overrate the progress we have made since those early times. Still, might makes right, and other remnants of barbarism linger amongst us. The thousand forms by which we write as in hieroglyphics, our present characters are far enough from showing that harmonious development of the faculties, of which we sometimes read the prophecy in our own souls. Let men and women be gentle and firm, brave and tender, instinctive but confirming their instincts by reasons. Let judgment and taste exercise their selecting and rejecting power among the stores of imagination and fancy. Let reflection preserve women from folly. The stern, quote, I ought, produce in them a concentration of intellectual effort. Forbid the apathy and self-indulgence which their physical constitution induces, and bind on them the necessity to use, cultivate, elevate all that self-consciousness reveals to them. Let them listen to their heart's dictates, not fearing that they will lead them astray, and we shall no longer hear of masculine women or effeminate men. Scattered up and down in the world's history, there are women who have set aside the accidents of position and left their mark on the ages. Some of them in whom was an imperfect moral development were guided only by a strong will, and others a holy purpose inspired noble deeds. These instances are not so rare as to let a sort of lusus naturae. They prove that reflection and power of concentration, which predominate in men, exist in women, and only require a more earnest culture. And what if our necessary position, our proper sphere, prevents the production of the epic and the drama, influence the council or the camp? How do we know that it is in the possible future women's intellect may not manifest itself in forms beautiful as poetry and art, permanent as empires, all emanating from her home, created out of it, from her relations as daughter, sister, wife, and mother? Out of these relations may yet rise a beauty and a power which will bless and heal the nations. Then the progress of the race will be harmonious and universal. The Hebrew seer said truly, men shall learn war no more.